Courtney Lilly, you're the showrunner for Blackish, which ended its run this spring after 8 seasons. You've been with the show for all 8 seasons, but you've only became the showrunner in season 6. What would you say was the biggest challenge, when you went from, your previous writer role into that showrunner position, when that came about?
It's interesting. They have a showrunner training program for the WGA, and there's a whole thing. You never know what you're going to expect. It's like everybody, the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched. And I realized, even despite having done this for, almost 2 decades by that point, what I didn't know. And I was just grateful. I was lucky because I walked into the job with, having been there for, 5 seasons before that with an entire support staff, and not just like traditional support staff, as you would think, like PAs, stuff like that. The former executive producer and showrunner of the show, Jonathan Groff, was still on the show helping out. He would help me out in post. We had an entire crew that knew who I was and was excited about me kind of leading them for a little bit. So the transition was made easy. So all the things I didn't know made it was easy to kind of knock a little off the learning curve, because everybody, I always look at it, we don't auteur these things. Maybe some people do. I certainly don't. It's such a team sport. And to have a team that was enthusiastic to get behind us and have Anthony and Tracy and Lawrence and such an incredible cast already, I keep saying, if you have Shaq and Kobe on your team, you're going to win a lot of games. And I was lucky enough to have incredibly talented people around me to make my transition into that job a lot easier.
And going into this final season, you had 7 seasons before it of story and character development. What were some of the most important things that you knew that you wanted to pay off before the show ended, and places that you wanted to make sure you checked off?
The nice thing about being kind of like a comedy is that we don't have any lingering questions. It's not a mystery like Twin Peaks where you're trying to solve. It's not Game of Thrones where you're trying to figure out who's going to end up on the Iron Throne. And so mostly what people watch the show for is to enjoy the time with that family, and we'd done 150 something episodes by that point, maybe a little more. So in the last 13, we just wanted to give them 13 more half hours where they could have fun, celebrate the joy that hopefully the show brought, be comedic. I know we get cited for doing kind of important issue-y kind of things, but maybe there's 2 or 3 of those a season. And, there's 20 episodes in which we enjoy, kind of seeing a family that enjoys being around each other. So that was the primary objective. Let's do 13 more half hours of fun where we can sit there and see this group before they just kind of shuffle off into syndication,
And one of the themes from the season was Bo and Dre kind of wanting a big change, in their lives at this point. And I felt like it, reflected a lot of people in this world since the pandemic. We've seen people reevaluating a lot. How did you come about deciding what those changes would be for them, and why they would make those decisions?
It's interesting. I mean, obviously the pandemic, the kind of way we all went back and looked at where we were in life, the decisions we were making, using it as an opportunity to kind of relaunch and reevaluate, that played a role into it, but also kind of getting ready to do a finale and a final season. We, the other writers, myself, Laura Guten Peterson, who was the EP on the show on my right hand, we talked a lot about what other shows have done. And we knew we wanted to kind of to go into this last season. It was also kind of we were more serialized than we usually are. We're very episodic, in nature. And so we knew to get to a satisfying ending, it had to kind of have more of a kind of we had to aim for an ending in a way that we traditionally don't do. So we had to take a look at it, see what other shows have done. And to get to the ending we were going for, we just kind of looked back and said, okay, where did we start? Cheers kind of went full circle with its ending. We wanted to go full circle. And for us, looking at Anthony's character, and the way that Kenya set up the show as a family that is lives outwardly in their lives as a Black family, and they don't happen to just be Black. They're proud of it. They live all the experience. They talk about it, and a lot of the issues arise from them being kind of outliers in their community. So we knew we wanted to go to a point where we started to question like some of the premises, and the premises of the pilot where we live in this neighborhood because we have to so our kids can go to school, or we have to because these are the only places where you can like have a house that's nice, or we have to because of this. And I think, one of the things we all started to do during the pandemic was question assumptions. And so what we did was went back and questioned some of the assumptions from the pilot so that our character could end in a place where he'd grown and that we couldn't go back, in a way, so that they've grown to a place that felt like a terminal point.
And one of the unique things about family comedies, especially, is you get this young cast that you're watching grow up on screen. Their characters are growing up. They as actors are growing up. What was it like developing those characters, like who they were as characters, and also leaning into what the actors' strengths were becoming?
I mean, honestly, it's a gift and it's a lot of luck because, in season 1, you cast, Miles and Marseille, and they're cute, and just obviously the physics of television production, you can't use them a lot. There are child labor laws, there are things you have to use them sparingly, and they can come in, deliver punchlines. They're cute. People love seeing cute kids on TV. We don't know if they're going to grow up to be, funny comedic actors or be able to turn emotional scenes. And a lot of shows that doesn't happen. And we got incredibly fortunate that we did. They developed into such good actors. We didn't have to hide from them. In fact, in season 6, we were able to run to them and embrace them as like, preteens, teenagers getting into junior high, and tell stories that we couldn't tell with Yara and Marcus because they were a little older when the show started and into high school. So look, a lot of this comes down to just luck, and we were very fortunate to be able to have two really good, strong, good kids too as actors who were willing to allow us to flex our wings and stretch our wings a little bit as writers, to sit there and say like, oh, hey, we can tell this kind of storyline. We can see what happens when they get in trouble. They don't just have to come in and be one-line characters. And so they, with their talents, they gave us the opportunity to kind of write them fuller and deeper. So that was, again, that's again like the gift of getting and running into the show and having such a talented support staff around me, and then having the gift of these talented actors. I was set up to succeed in a way that like I'm incredibly grateful for.
And you mentioned the show occasionally having these more deeper thematic episodes within the context of what's happening in the world. And this one, you had that really emotional near the end, "If a Black Man Cries in the Woods" episode. Was that one you always knew that you wanted to kind of have that moment for those 3 Johnson men?
In a way, yeah. Lawrence actually came to us in season so it was 2020. We were definitely in the pandemic. I was working from home. It was before we started shooting, and he had an idea. He just wanted to talk about, there's an armor a lot of Black people, particularly men, wear in the world to protect themselves from the world itself, and finding a space to have a conversation about vulnerability. And the show is set up kind of with this spine of the Lawrence, Anthony, Marcus, that kind of generational setup that, and we saw a lot. We derived a lot of comedy from, Anthony being hard on Marcus's character. And for us, we knew that we wanted to resolve that. And Lawrence gave us the idea. That was, again, in season 7, before we even knew there was a season 8, and we had to hold off on it because it felt like an ending point. It felt like we needed to keep the dynamic going for all the reasons that it had worked on the show, and it needed to kind of be our emotional closure in a way for Anthony to really grow as a character. At the beginning, he's sitting there and saying like, my kids are Black-ish, and like he's trying to make them something that they aren't. And we addressed that for 170 episodes, and we got to an end where he had to just kind of not just accept who his son was, but also know that like all the work he had done to protect his son had worked. And now they crossed a point in their relationship where it wasn't about protecting him. He's raised him into a man. It should be about being that port in a storm, allowing himself to be vulnerable so that they could connect on another level. And then seeing obviously Lawrence's character as somebody who had never gotten to that place with his own son, Anthony, and that they were all the three of them on that trip allowed to kind of like find a space where they could just be honest and vulnerable with each other. That was our goal. And Rob Chavis wrote a great script. Ayanna Morris Jackson directed it incredibly well. And I think, as you know, again, if I ever get a chance to work with actors as talented as them again, you know, I'll just be incredibly grateful, you know, which is the theme of the whole thing, just gratitude. But like literally it's we can do that because they're so good, you know. And so it was an episode we were incredibly proud of. And it felt like, you know, a lot of shows that like you really get that the end comes before the goodbye in a lot of ways. And so for us, that was really our end. And then the next episode, the finale, was our goodbye.
Well, congratulations on the show, on 8 years of great work, and many, many more in syndication, as you mentioned. And thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you, man.